So every day on average, 55 people in the US become homeless. For some, it's a choice. For many, it's not. While we had seen a decrease for a number of years, the homeless rate in the US is going back up again, and in a lot of states, it's exploding. If the homeless rate continued at the rate we've seen for the last few years, by the year 20,949, the whole US population is going to be living on the streets. Okay, that's not going to happen. Although with the pandemic and the rising cost of living and the spike in drug use, there's a lot of people that are worried that we're going to see a spike in homeless folks in the coming years. Now, the homeless issue is a very controversial one. The root of the problem's really complex, and politicians have been baffled as to how to solve it. And we'll talk about that. And you're going to find that a lot of Americans view homelessness from two entirely different camps. Some of us feel bad for the homeless, and we put the blame on our government. And some of us blame the homeless themselves for their own decisions. We're going to talk about that too. However you feel about homelessness, though, it's a very complex problem and one that shouldn't exist in the richest country in the world. There isn't one answer because there isn't just one problem. In this video, we're going to look at the most homeless states in America. Some are going to be a surprise and many will not. But I think we can all agree the problem is out of control. Now here I am in my backyard, living in my tent. It's relatively safe here for me, but every night there's hundreds of thousands of us that are out in tents and on sidewalks and living in their cars and hotel rooms, and it's not safe for them. Drive around and you'll see them on a lot of corners in some big cities. Let's take a look and see which parts of our country are going through a homeless crisis right now. Now we're going to begin in the state of Colorado. The people in Denver sure know about the rise in homelessness here. Over the past few years, there's been a big spike in the number of people living on the streets in Denver, in places that were once clean and safe. The state of Colorado estimates that on any given night, there's about 10,000 people living without shelter here, but that number is actually pretty hard to measure. I mean, for one, there's lots of people living in areas that you'll never see. And a lot of times there's family who are living in hotel rooms or living in their cars and they won't want to be counted. So it's likely this number's much higher. In fact, another report said the Denver metro area had 30,000 people who had accessed homeless resources last year. Again, there's no real way of getting an exact count, but it's estimated that Colorado has seen an 8% rise in homelessness in the last decade. It's estimated that about a quarter of the homeless population in Colorado is chronically homeless. Like, they've been living on the streets for years now, and they're going to continue to do so. Because for many, it's a lifestyle of choice. Despite how you feel about the cost of living or the lack of resources for the chronically homeless, it's true that a large part of the homeless population simply wants to live a life like this. And of course, in Colorado, a big reason for the number of people who are homeless here is legal marijuana. The state saw a big surge in its population when marijuana became legal. Now, Nevada is another state that legalized marijuana, and it's had an impact on the state's homeless population too. Now, there's fewer homeless people in Nevada than in Colorado, but the population here is far smaller than in Colorado, so the per capita number is higher. About 9,000 people in Nevada were homeless last year, but in the greater Las Vegas metro area, there's more than 13,000 people that experienced homelessness at some point. And there's actually a lot of people who live in the sewers underneath the city of Las Vegas who are likely never going to be counted either. Of course, booze and drugs and gambling are a big draw to Las Vegas, and that's going to boost the homeless numbers. But it's also pretty warm here year-round, and as we're going to see, the warmer the climate, the more people are willing to sleep on the streets. Other states like Arizona and New Mexico also have a large homeless problem, and they're just outside of the top 10. But warm weather doesn't necessarily mean a large homeless population. That's because the states with the least number of homeless people are in the deep south. Mississippi has the fewest number of homeless people per capita, followed by Louisiana and Alabama, and those are some of our warmest states. Why is that? Two reasons, primarily. Far less people in the Deep South live in urbanized areas, but the cost of living in the Deep South is really low. Look, you can see Mississippi residents can comfortably rent a house on about $3,500 a month combined monthly income, but in California, a family needs about $8,300 a month to comfortably rent a home. A huge difference. Now, Vermont's kind of a unique situation. The homeless rate here had been going down, but it's on the rise once again. There's far fewer homeless people than in the other states we're going to talk about, but it's a small state too. It's estimated that there's about 20 homeless people for every 10,000 residents. Of course, it's a lot colder here in Vermont than it is out west, but 10% of the people in Vermont live on the streets every night. That's a lot lower than it is out west, where about 1 in 3 people live outdoors. Vermont ranks 4th in the nation for welfare spending per capita, and a lot of people here complain about high taxes and a high cost of living. However, all that tax money just isn't enough to keep up with all the homeless people in Vermont. The state spends $140,000 a night putting up people in hotel rooms, and they actually spend a lot more than that fielding calls from hotel owners regarding vandalism and drug use. Incidentally, Vermont ranks towards the top of the nation in drug use and overdose rates too. Alaska, believe it or not, ranks 7th in terms of homeless rate per capita. Of course, it's very cold here, but still 18% of Alaskans who are homeless live unsheltered. Now, a lot of people here will just commit a petty crime to get thrown in jail intentionally, so they're warm, and then they get out, and then they do it all over again. Now, the cost of living here is also very high. Alaska ranks 9th in the country for most expensive when you factor in the cost to have a roof over your head. Anchorage has a crisis on its hands. People are wandering around, or they're couch surfing, or they're battling bed bugs or crime at local flea bag motels. But it's more than the cost of living, it's the culture in Alaska. There's a big drug and alcohol problem here, and the number of domestic violence and all the child abuse and the sexual assault rates are all super high in Alaska, which means people are in transition a lot more often here. What are they doing about it? Well, Alaska doubled its homeless assistance program to $8 million a year, or $8,000 per homeless person per year. As a nation, we spend about $3 billion annually on homeless assistance programs at the federal level. To put that into perspective, we gave Afghanistan nearly $5 billion last year, and that's just the tip of our foreign spending iceberg. As you can imagine, we give away a lot of money to other countries while our own citizens live like this, and that is a shame. There's about 25,000 people in Massachusetts who are homeless on any given night these days, and it's estimated that the number of families who are homeless here has increased at the highest rate of any other state, and that's terrible. Overall, as a state, it's up by 20% in the last decade. Now, this is really the only real right to shelter state in the country, though New York has similar laws. Basically, it means if you don't have anywhere to live, the state will put you up in a hotel room for up to a year, and then help you transition to permanent housing, though the wait for that's like 10 years. I mean, 10 years is a long time, but some people never do. It's really complicated why. There's a lot of homeless people who recently lost their jobs, and they had other setbacks. And those people sleep in motels or in their cars or in other vehicles. They often move around a lot until they can get back on their feet again. Those people can be helped. But then there's a lot of people who are just openly living on the streets like this, and they're not from that group for the most part. Some Americans say that the people you see on the streets choose to live like this because in the shelters they have to follow rules. There's places that'll take them in for free and they'll help them get back on their feet. I mean, would somebody that has a healthy state of mind choose to live like this? For a lot of these people on the streets, it's addiction and mental illness. Now, other Americans are going to say this is out of their hands. Homeless people exist like this because of a cost of living problem. What do you say? Are the street beggars and the sidewalk campers like this homeless because of addiction or because of housing costs? And is it fair to lump these people in with poor families who are trying to not be homeless? Let us know in the comments below. Okay, so Seattle's just a mess. As you've heard, the homeless problem here is beyond a crisis and is getting worse by the week. What was once a beautiful city has been taken over by drug addicts, the mentally unstable, and the lifestyle street people. Of course, there's a lot of other people in the state who are not just those you see in Seattle. There's about 25,000 homeless people in Washington state at the time of this writing, but again, nobody knows the true number. Seattle's talked about taxing businesses up to $120 million a year to help fund the homeless relief programs and help pay for affordable housing, and that scared a lot of people. And if you haven't heard, a lot of companies and residents have been leaving Seattle. How much of the problem in places like Seattle is because of the cost of living, and how much is the lifestyle? Now, Seattle's the perfect example of a cost of living problem. Sure, getting a place in Seattle's out of reach for a lot of people, but they can relocate, right? I mean, if you get priced out of your house, there's plenty of places you can move or you can afford, and there's even agencies that'll help you relocate. Am I oversimplifying this? Like, if you can't afford to live in Seattle, why stay and live in your car? I'm not trying to be insensitive, I just don't get it. Well, as it turns out, the New York Times had something to say about that. They wrote an article that said that a lot of times people do leave, but the thing that keeps people from moving from big cities they can't afford and will never be able to afford are social connections. So a lot of the people are sticking around for their support groups, even though they can't afford to live there. Anyways, the cost of living in places like Seattle is very complicated. Sometimes it's greedy landlords that add fire to the problem of affordable housing. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we get to New York, but regulations make it hard for developers to build affordable housing or to justify their construction to begin with. This guy says he's a landlord and a developer, and the fees that the government charges make it hard to justify building affordable units on the land he owns, even though he'd love to do it. So maybe we just have to take away regulations. Of course, Oregon has a huge homeless problem. We knew about that. While the national homeless rate's gone down a bit over the last 10 years, Oregon's has gone up by 14% and seems to be going up all the time. Portland and Eugene have the most homeless people here, and they both rank towards the top nationally. Lots of people complain that the state of Oregon caters to the homeless, which is why more and more of them are showing up. Here's an example from an Oregon resident I spoke to recently about that very problem. Why is Oregon becoming a location, central gathering point for homeless druggies?
I think it's probably just the welfare programs and stuff that they're giving them. And I heard that like up north in Seattle, I know they give out tents. And I think there's got to be something like that going on here, because I'm like, I don't know where they're getting all their tents. Obviously, it's like super easy to get stamps and welfare and all this. And yeah, it's crazy. And then I don't know if you've heard of this. This cracks me up. So there's a thing that people are doing like crazy. So our bottles have a 10-cent deposit on them here. So what tons of the homeless people do, they give them like a flat of like a crate of bottles, and they'll take them to where they recycle, and they'll dump all the water out and turn in the cans just to get a couple bucks to go get some booze or some drugs or whatever. It's funny because you'll go to the can recycling place and you'll see a whole bunch of little lids all over the ground. You're like, yeah, I know what went down here, and it'll be all wet. Ridiculous.
Of course, we expect California to have the most homeless people, and we'd be right. But per capita, it's only third. Nobody knows exactly how many homeless people are in this state. I filmed this in Los Angeles this past October, where it's estimated that there's 40,000 homeless people in this city alone. It's probably way higher than that. What was once just Skid Row has blossomed into Skid City. There's a lot of movie stars in LA. I haven't heard them helping this problem. A lot of people say LA manufactures its own homeless problem due to a lack of affordable places to live, and I'm sure that's correct. However, the addicted and the mentally unstable I'm showing here do not seem to be victims of a housing shortage. California as a whole has seen a 16% increase in homeless rates over the last decade. They think there's 150,000 people here, but it's likely much higher than that. In the whole state, nobody knows how many homeless people there are, but everywhere you look, there's homeless people in California now. San Francisco is also terrible. It's the city without pity. People just walk around San Francisco and they step over people sleeping on the sidewalks all the time. They've taken over much of downtown now, and the city kind of panders to them. They put them up in rooms and they give them cigarettes and drugs and booze to keep them under control emotionally. They seem to have more rights than the average working person. The homeless people here were actually given a higher priority for COVID vaccines than most California residents were. Can you believe that? Homeless people got a COVID vaccine before everybody else? When it rains, all the homeless people just sleep on the buses and drive around in circles all night. But when it rains, that also means all the poop and needles go down the drain, so that's good. No wonder California has the most people moving out when you look at how things look right now with all the homeless people everywhere. It's actually pretty sad, and there's no solution. Of course, Hawaii is really expensive. It's actually the most expensive state to live in, so the homeless problem there is definitely related to a lack of affordable housing, and it's also a lot harder to get off the island, so they're kind of stuck there. However, the good news, if there's any good news in this depressing video, is that homelessness in Hawaii is actually going down. The state's no longer number one per capita for homeless. But as it stands, there's still about 7,000 people on these islands that are homeless, and that's a lot considering the small population here. Now, what's Hawaii doing right? Spending money to save money. They have a program called Housing First, and it provides free housing for homeless people, and it costs about $25,000 a year per person. However, the state saves money on healthcare and from locking people up when they give them a home. So they don't have to spend money on giving them free healthcare or putting them in jail. So it seems that housing Hawaiians is an investment. But the budget only goes so far, and the state admits the biggest problem is still funding for drug rehab and mental illness treatment. They don't have a lot of money. They need more money. But you know who isn't investing in housing its residents? New York isn't. At least New York City isn't. They actually get caught schlepping their homeless people across the river in New Jersey. New Jersey people apparently don't like that very much. The state of New York pays for a year of rent in another state as long as you don't come back. Apparently it's cheaper to just move them into New Jersey than it is to keep them within their own city limits. A year of rent for free. Can you imagine that? They also buy them one-way tickets to get the homeless people the hell out of their city. No questions asked, just leave. I guess if you can't solve the problem, the easy way is just to erase the problem. There's been a lot of cases of cops who are just sick of arresting the same homeless guy over and over. They'll just go down to the bus station and just buy him a one-way ticket just to get him out of town. I mean, that's really nice, but it's really sad too. And it's nothing unique to New York City either. A lot of cities do this. Anyways, there's somewhere around 100,000 homeless people in the state of New York, and around 80,000 of them are in New York City alone, even though Mayor Bill de Blasio says it's far less than that. All in all, about 1 in 5 homeless people in the country are either in LA or New York City alone, people. Now, New York doesn't send all their people out of state. They try to help their homeless. They have a bunch of shelters, and their budget's about $4 billion annually, and most of that's spent in New York City alone. But this is interesting. New York City homeless shelters apparently charge whatever the heck they want. That's pissing people off because, the budget has limits. Of course, New York City proper is very expensive to live in, and there's definitely a lack of affordable housing here. Now, we talked about greedy landlords earlier and how complex the affordable housing problem is. Rent control is supposed to provide affordable housing, but only for people who are actually in the building to begin with. If somebody moves out, you can charge the next guy whatever you want. So there's landlords in New York City that are incentivized to have you move out, maybe by not fixing stuff or not killing the rats or the roaches. And then when you move, the next guy comes in and he has to pay more than you paid. And so these landlords can charge whatever the heck they want. So they wait for somebody to come along that'll pay a lot of money. And so all these units are left vacant for a long time. And there's another problem with rent control in some cities like San Francisco. I mean, the land's so valuable that building owners will turn their apartments into condos or retail or just knock them down, because the rent control has made running their building unprofitable. And of course, gentrification's definitely made living in large urban areas harder for poor folks. But again, the question arises, why don't people who can't afford just leave? Well, they feel stuck. All their friends and family are there. It's their social network. So as you can see, the problem of homelessness is very complicated and very sad, and there's a lot of stuff to go over. The US has a terrible problem with homelessness. Now, part of the problem is politics. I mean, you have to set aside money or create laws to help people with housing, but you don't want to upset the taxpayers or the businesses in the area. Addressing addiction and mental illness is another thorn we have yet to solve, but we have to admit, there's a huge percentage of homeless in this country that does not want help, nor do they want a roof over their heads. And we have to just come to grips with that. Anyways, that's our look at the most homeless states in America. It's a big mess. Some states have unique approaches, and others are making it worse by sort of encouraging it. I don't know the answer. Do you? I mean, we can't build a house for everybody in America, because then nobody would want to work, right?
You're never alone, out on your own. 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 Believe it's all that you have, receive it, don't hold it back. Don't hold back, don't hold back, don't hold back. Turn. Believe it's all that you have,
I'm going to call my mom. She lives in California. I'm going to ask her about the homeless problem there.
Well, it's about time.
Hi, Mom. How are you?
Hi, son. I'm okay.
I'm doing a video about the homeless problem, and I was wondering if I could ask you about some of the homeless things that you've seen out there.
Oh, what a sad story this is, isn't it?
What's it like out there in California? What's the homeless problem like?
Well, they're just causing a lot of trouble. They started at least 3 fires last week in Los Angeles. They call them eating fires. They drag their propane tanks into their hiding places, and they light them for warmth. And when the wind blows, they start fires.
Have you seen a lot more homeless people there the last few years?
Sometimes they're starting to pile up on the freeway between Redlands and Highland again. And they're right by the freeway. There are cars, lots of cars are piling up again, and usually Redlands runs them out. But I don't know what they're waiting for, because it looks like it's getting kind of out of control again.
What are they doing to help the homeless or to...
Well, they always have people that are helping them. There are places they give them a handout. They offer them housing. They offer them clinics. They offer them places to deal with their addiction issues. But at night, I know they wander all over the place, and they just make the biggest messes. The mess in the parking lot, the mess on the sidewalk. I just can't even. It's gross. It's disgusting. They need hazmat people. It's so bad that they really need hazmat to get in there every day and wash off those sidewalks. And I know that they're not doing it. So I just said, I'm done. I'm done.
Why are there so many homeless people in California now? Why are they picking California?
Well, the weather, I'm sure the weather is complimentary, and they can come out here to California, and they go from county to county, and they get general relief money. And if California would cut them off, they would not be traveling. They would not be coming here by the numbers that they do. Plus, has closed something like 17 prisons. And he's released, I don't know how many thousands of prisoners. So where do you think these people are going to go? They're going to go live on the street. Out come the arsonists. Out come the drug addicts. He's releasing these people. They're dangerous. Imagine closing 17 prisons.
Is that like one of the main reasons a lot of people are leaving California?
Yeah, well, yes. The justice system is just completely collapsed out here. And that is one of the reasons, I'm sure. But California and politics, we may rise from the ashes yet.
Okay. Well, I hope California does rise from the ashes. I hope California gets better. Right now, California's a little sick and they're under the weather. So you stay safe, and I miss you guys and love you.
Okay. Take care. Love you. Bye.
Okay, bye. Mom always says it the way she feels.
And I don't think that Portland really has like the dangerous gangs like that. It's just like anarchists and druggies. I mean, our state overall is being overrun by druggies. It's even in my little town. So outside of my little town, right along the freeway, there's this tent city, and it's getting bigger. Like just about every week, you're seeing it grow and grow, and it's bizarre. It's unlike it. We've always had a few homeless people, but now it's like these major encampments. And then in Portland, from what I understand, it's way beyond that. It's just like massive cities of tents and homeless people. But yeah, it's crazy. I can't believe how much there's in my little town. It's like, I don't know what they do here. They all camp out they're actually right along the 5. So if you're going through Roseburg, you just look, and there's people on either side of the freeway. And I think what a horrible place to be homeless. It's just, we got pretty nasty weather oftentimes. What's funny too, is I was commenting to my wife when we were going by the other day, and I was like, man, some of these people actually have like really nice, like high-end tents that they're camping in. I'm like, where are they getting these things?
Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. you should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.